The Galactic Council chamber was a place of reason, of order, where the greatest minds of the universe gathered to discuss the future of civilization. But tonight, the air crackled with unease. Representatives from thousands of species sat in tense silence, their forms ranging from towering insectoids to sentient clouds of energy, all facing the center of the room where High Commissioner Dax flickered nervously. Dax was ancient, a crystalline being who had witnessed wars that lasted millennia, stars being born and dying, even the devouring of galaxies by cosmic horrors. Yet nothing had prepared him for what he was about to say. His form pulsed a worried shade of purple as he addressed the assembly. "We have a problem." A low murmur spread across the room. At the far end of the chamber, Admiral Kirill, a battle-scarred reptilian warlord, narrowed his piercing yellow eyes. "How serious?" Kirill rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Dax hesitated a fraction of a second, but for a being that thought at the speed of light, it was an eternity. "It's the humans," he said. The room fell dead silent. Dax's glow dimmed, as if saying it out loud made it real. "They have an ability we cannot explain." At first, the council assumed it was a joke. But then, Admiral Kirill stepped forward, his massive claws dancing over a control panel as a hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber. "Observe," he said, his voice unusually grim. And in that moment, the entire Galactic Council watched the universe begin to unravel. The Galactic Council chamber was a monolithic structure, a relic of an age far older than any civilization present. Its towering crystalline walls pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow alive, in a way that defied understanding. The domed ceiling stretched into infinity, shimmering with distant galaxies as if the very fabric of space had been woven into its design. A hush blanketed the chamber, thick and suffocating. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the circular rows, their bodies shifting, fidgeting, or quivering, each reacting in their own species-specific way to the tension in the air. At the center stood Council High Commissioner Dax, his form an intricate lattice of translucent crystal, refracting light into a kaleidoscope of anxious colors. Right now, his natural glow flickered in shades of deep violet, an unmistakable sign of distress among his kind. He did not waste words. "We have a problem," Dax announced, his voice resonating like wind chimes in a storm. His body pulsed erratically, the violet hue deepening. "A very serious problem." The words hung in the air like a specter. From the far end of the chamber, Admiral Kirill stirred. The massive reptilian figure shifted in his seat, his emerald green scales catching the ambient light. A chest full of polished metals rattled as he leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing into slits. The room, already quiet, somehow felt even stiller. "How serious are we talking?" Kirill's voice was a low growl, the kind that could send lesser creatures scrambling for cover. Dax hesitated. It was only for a fraction of a second, but for a being who processed thought at the speed of light, that hesitation was deafening. Then, finally, he spoke. "It's the humans." The chamber erupted into whispers. Hushed conversations in 100 different languages spilled over one another, the tension mutating into something even heavier. Unease. Fear. Dax continued, his voice carrying through the din, steady but grim. "They have an ability we cannot explain." And then silence. A silence so absolute, it felt as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Admiral Kirill rose to his full height, towering over most beings in the chamber. His posture was rigid, his movements deliberate, controlled. Clawed fingers danced across the air as he activated a holographic projection at the center of the room. A glowing sphere of shifting data streams materialized, bathing his scaled face in an eerie blue light. "There is a phrase humans use," he began, his tone unusually measured. His usual commanding presence had been replaced by something else, something closer to apprehension. The delegates leaned in, their attention magnetized. "A phrase that seems to manipulate probability itself." No one laughed. Not a single scoff. Not a single dismissive remark. The weight in Kirill's voice was unmistakable. A representative from the dark collective, an elongated, skeletal being with 3 sets of unblinking eyes tilted forward. His spindly fingers twitched against the edge of his podium. "What phrase?" the dark inquired, his voice layered in static, like radio waves bending through deep space. Kirill exhaled slowly, deliberately, as if steadying himself. Then, in a voice that barely concealed his own disbelief, he spoke. "Hold my coffee." The reaction was instantaneous. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Some species recoiled instinctively, their sensory appendages flaring with distress. Others began muttering in their own languages, hissing, chirping, clicking, voices overlapping in a chaotic storm of confusion. The room had descended into barely controlled panic. Kirill stood there, silent, letting the weight of his words settle like an anchor in deep space. He had seen it firsthand. And he knew, without a shadow of a doubt. The humans had broken reality itself. The hologram crackled to life, its shifting blue light casting eerie shadows across the Galactic Council chamber. Static flickered for a brief moment before stabilizing into a live recording from the Zaneri vessel. The footage was grainy, distorted at the edges by the sheer electromagnetic chaos radiating from the ship's failing reactor. On screen, the engineering bay was a scene of absolute panic. Sirens screamed, their piercing wails blending into the erratic hissing of steam vents. Emergency lights pulsed in violent shades of red and orange, casting long, jagged shadows over the terrified Zaneri crew. The Zaneri, a species of tall, translucent beings whose bioluminescent skin shifted in response to emotional states, were flashing in rapid, uncontrolled bursts of yellow and white, pure, unfiltered distress. They moved frantically, tendrils flailing as they scrambled over control panels, desperately inputting commands that refused to register. The ship's reactor core, a massive sphere of swirling plasma, flickered dangerously. Its color, normally a soft, stable green, had turned into an erratic whirl of deep crimson and violet, signs of imminent collapse. Readings scrolled across a holographic interface, a chaotic mess of fluctuating numbers that made no sense. A catastrophic breach was moments away. And then there was him. Standing at the heart of the chaos, completely unbothered, was Captain Tom Wilson. A human. While the Zaneri crew scrambled around him, Wilson was drinking coffee. He was leaning casually against a control panel, holding a chipped ceramic mug in one hand, steam still curling lazily from its surface. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, sleeves rolled up just enough to suggest he had been casually lounging moments before. Another violent tremor rocked the ship. The reactor's core pulsed dangerously. One more fluctuation, and the Zaneri would no longer exist. Wilson sighed, giving the reactor an almost bored glance. Then, in the same tone one might use when asking someone to hold their jacket, he calmly uttered the phrase that would shake the foundations of the universe. "Hold my coffee." And just like that he set the mug down. And he fixed the reactor. Without proper tools. Without protective gear. Without following any standard safety protocols. He just did it. The holographic projection zoomed in, focusing entirely on Wilson. The human engineer, now slightly more engaged, scanned the failing reactor with an expression that was somewhere between mild curiosity and mild annoyance. He gave it a quick once-over, then reached down, picked up a random piece of metal debris, and casually walked towards the main control panel. The Zaneri crew stood frozen, their bioluminescence flickering wildly in sheer confusion. Wilson lifted the metal fragment, nothing more than a discarded bracket from an unrelated system, and banged it against the control panel. Once. Twice. And suddenly, the alarms cut off instantly. The reactor core, which had been moments from a quantum implosion, stabilized. Not just stabilized, improved. The Zaneri's monitoring displays surged with data, and for a moment, even the ship's AI hesitated, struggling to comprehend what had just occurred. Reactor output, 127% efficiency. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. The camera zoomed in on Wilson, who blinked at the readouts, nodded approvingly, and casually picked up his coffee again. With a satisfied sip, he muttered, "Yeah, that should hold." Back in the council chamber, the room was stunned into absolute stillness. Commissioner Dax flickered in and out of focus, his crystalline form pulsing erratically, caught somewhere between confusion and outright disbelief. "That's impossible," he finally managed, his voice a whisper. Admiral Kirul didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes locked on the still flickering hologram, his massive claws gripping the railing so tightly the metal groaned in protest. He exhaled slowly and muttered, "Tell that to the reactor." The hologram flickers once more, shifting from video footage to a sprawling data sheet, overflowing with reports. Names, locations, timestamps, all meticulously recorded yet utterly incomprehensible. Admiral Kirul's clawed fingers swipe across the projection, bringing up an ever-growing list of anomalous human activity. 247 incidents. His deep, rumbling voice barely carries over the stunned silence. All within the last standard month. The council members remain motionless, their collective shock settling into something far worse, a cold, creeping dread. The dark representative, a towering, insectoid being, clicks his mandibles nervously. "Surely this is just a coincidence dash." "No," Kirul interrupts, his reptilian eyes narrowing. He expands the list, emphasizing the one repeating variable in each case. "It's not just hold my coffee," he growls. The air in the chamber seems to thicken as more phrases appear, projected in bold, flashing text. "Hold my beer. Hold my soda. Hold my juice box." A hush falls over the room. It is a silence unlike any other, a silence so thick with existential horror that it feels like reality itself is holding its breath. The crystalline Commissioner Dax dims to a faint, almost imperceptible glow. This is not science. This is not logic. This is something else entirely. The hologram shifts again. This time, it shows surveillance footage from Space Station Gamma 9. The recording is grainy, washed in the artificial greenish glow of the station's emergency lighting. The camera feed centers on two figures standing in a cramped, dimly lit maintenance bay. A gravity generator, a towering pillar of whirring machinery, flickers erratically, its stabilizing lights fluctuating between normal operation and imminent failure. Sparks spit from exposed wiring. Panels groan under immense pressure. Standing next to it is Relian, a six-limbed, amphibian-like engineer whose smooth blue skin is currently turning a sickly shade of pale green, a biological response to pure, unfiltered terror. Relian's movements are frantic, desperate. His webbed fingers fly over the control interface, but nothing responds. The station's gravity field is destabilizing, and if the generator fully collapses, everyone on board will be smashed into paste against the bulkheads or sent drifting into the void. This is it. Relian gasps, his voice trembling. We're done for. And then the human speaks. Hold my beer. The words are barely audible. A mere mutter, spoken with a tone so casual it's almost insulting. The camera zooms in on him, Joe, a human maintenance worker in oil-stained coveralls, sleeves rolled up. A beer can half empty rests on a nearby console, condensation beating against the metal surface. He takes a final sip. Then he kicks the generator. Not a measured adjustment. Not a precise recalibration. A kick. A lazy, half-hearted tap with his boot, as if he were nudging a vending machine that had refused to dispense his drink. And just like that, the generator stabilizes. Its lights return to full power. The output readings normalize. The entire station's artificial gravity rebalances in an instant. Silence. A long, paralyzing silence. Relian does not move. His gill slits flutter, his limbs lock in place. He stares at Joe, unblinking. Joe stretches, lets out a content sigh, then casually picks up his beer again. Welp, he says, taking another sip, that's fixed. The recording cuts to static. Back in the council chamber, no one speaks. Not because they have nothing to say but because their minds cannot process what they have just witnessed. The Galactic Council chamber is in absolute chaos. Representatives from hundreds of star systems, beings of every imaginable shape, size, and composition are shouting over each other, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic and disbelief. At the center of it all, a towering, cephalopod-like diplomat from the Zelvan Empire slams a limb against the conference table, his chromatophores flashing an urgent, angry red. We must ban humans from drinking anything. The sheer volume of his voice rattles the chamber walls. For a brief moment, the room is silent. Then, a smaller, frail-looking representative from the K-Rit Alliance, whose gelatinous form quivers under the weight of his own anxiety, raises a trembling appendage. But he stammers. They'll just switch to. Hold my juice box. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. A new level of existential dread settles over the council. Dax, the crystalline High Commissioner, dims so much that his glow is barely visible now. He seems to be losing structural integrity, as though even his molecular stability is wavering under the weight of this horrifying realization. Across the room, an elder of the Xi4 Tribunal, a species renowned for their mastery of probability physics, slumps into his seat. His 3 pairs of eyes blink out of sync, his mandibles twitching as though his brain simply refuses to process this reality. By the void. He whispers. There is no stopping them. No one dares to argue. Because they all know he's right. The once mighty and composed Galactic Council is reduced to whispers and nervous glances. Admiral Kirill, the battle-hardened reptilian warrior, shakes his head slowly, methodically, as if he's trying to physically shake loose the confusion that has gripped his mind. It's not intentional, he growls. They don't even seem to realize what they're doing. Dax flickers weakly. His crystalline structure shudders a rare and unsettling sight for a being that exists in pure stability. Then what are they? He murmurs. For a long moment, no one speaks. And then, from the far end of the chamber, a deep, monotone voice cuts through the heavy silence. Reality benders. Every head turns toward the speaker, an elder from the Kralith Enclave, a race that has spent millennia mapping the very fabric of probability itself. He stands slowly, his biomechanical exoskeleton humming softly, the cold glow of his cybernetic implants pulsing in thought. Not high-level manipulators, like the ascendant races, he clarifies. But he hesitates, as though the words themselves are too terrifying to say aloud. Low-level reality benders. The council is dead silent. For the first time in galactic history, there is no argument, no debate. Because every single being in that room knows. The only thing more terrifying than a species that bends reality on purpose is a species that does it completely by accident. The Galactic Council chamber is already teetering on the edge of full-scale existential meltdown. Representatives from hundreds of advanced civilizations sit frozen in sheer, unfiltered terror, their minds struggling to comprehend the unstoppable anomaly that is humanity. The air is thick with the tension of unanswered questions. What are humans? Why do they defy probability? How can they be stopped? And then, a slow, deliberate squeak echoes through the silent chamber. The source? A human janitor, idly pushing a mop across the polished floor, completely unfazed by the cosmic crisis unfolding around him. He stops. Looks up. Shrugs. Hold my spray bottle. Instantly. Dax glitches. The entire chamber collectively short-circuits. The Xi4 elder drops his staff. The Kralith scientist flatlines for a full 3 seconds. Admiral Kirul's pupils contract into pinpricks, his battle-hardened reflexes screaming at him to retreat. Dax, who just moments ago had been processing the mind-shattering implications of human probability manipulation, immediately ends the meeting. A brilliant pulse of ultraviolet energy erupts from his core, signaling a rapid emergency shutdown. The holograms vanish. The chamber plunges into silence. The council adjourns itself before it can witness whatever nightmare reality the janitor was about to create. Deep space. Aboard the warship Infinite Probability, one of the most technologically advanced vessels ever constructed, a disaster is unfolding. The quantum drive has failed catastrophically. Without it, the ship is stranded in the void, light years away from any hope of rescue. The bridge is bathed in red emergency lights, casting deep shadows over the tense, exhausted crew. Captain Zan, a veteran of countless battles, stares at the cascading diagnostic reports. Every calculation, every simulation, every possible fix all point to the same conclusion. The drive is beyond repair. His hands tighten into fists. The crew exchanges worried glances, their normally unshakable confidence crumbling into grim acceptance. And then, from the back of the room, a voice. Calm. Unconcerned. I can fix it. The crew turns slowly, hesitantly. A lone human steps forward. Marcus Rodriguez. An engineer. Not the ship's chief scientist. Not a quantum physicist. Not even a high-ranking officer. Just, a human engineer. A long silence follows. Captain Zan's frills twitch in uncertainty. The bridge crew exchanges uneasy glances. Every logical part of their minds tells them this is impossible. And yet, Rodriguez looks completely serious. His hands are stuffed casually into his pockets, his stance relaxed, his expression eerily confident, as if fixing a catastrophically failed quantum drive was as simple as changing a light bulb. Deep in their bones, the crew feels it. Something far more terrifying than an engine failure. Because they all know exactly what he's going to say next. Rodriguez steps forward, rolling his shoulders like a man about to do something reckless, ill-advised, and utterly impossible. He stares at the failing quantum drive, an unfathomably complex piece of technology, designed by the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy. It hums ominously, the energy within it unstable, volatile, moments away from an irreversible cascade failure. The alien engineers watch in silent horror. Captain Zan's voice is barely a whisper. "Rodriguez, don't. Rodriguez." He just tilts his head, sizing up the problem. Then, with an almost ceremonial slowness, he cracks his knuckles. And says it. "Hold my coffee." The bridge explodes into chaotic screams. Every alien in the room lunges toward him in sheer, unfiltered panic. "Stop him. Secure the human. Somebody for the love of the cosmos take away his hands." But it's too late. Rodriguez is already moving. With zero hesitation, Rodriguez rips open an access panel, ignoring the blinking warning signs that scream unauthorized entry, lethal energy levels detected. The room gasps. Then, without a single tool, Rodriguez reaches into the tangled mess of hyper-advanced circuitry and bypasses the safety protocols, with a paperclip. The bridge falls dead silent. Captain Zan's voice is hoarse, disbelieving. Did he just dash? Rodriguez doesn't stop. He rips out a burnt-out capacitor, glances at it, shrugs, and casually replaces it with a piece of chewing gum foil from his pocket. The alien engineers are seconds away from cardiac arrest. The dark science officer whispers in pure horror. "That's not how quantum mechanics works." Rodriguez pops his neck, glances at the control panel, then, with surgical precision, smacks it once with the palm of his hand. Boom. The quantum drive surges to life. A deep, resonant hum fills the ship, vibrating through the walls with a power that shouldn't exist. Energy readings skyrocket, not just stabilizing, but exceeding all known efficiency limits. The diagnostics flicker wildly, before recalibrating to a number that should be theoretically impossible. 300% efficiency. The bridge crew is frozen in absolute horror. Not a single soul dares to speak. Rodriguez wipes his hands off on his jumpsuit, as if he'd just changed a flat tire, and casually picks up his coffee. The aliens. They just stare. No one moves. No one breathes. Captain Zan's mandibles click weakly. His brain refuses to process what just happened. Admiral Kirul's scales have gone pale. The dark scientist has shut down completely, their minds stuck in an irreversible logic loop. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Commissioner Dax, still flickering in disbelief, manages to whisper. "That's impossible." Rodriguez shrugs. Takes a sip of coffee. "Yeah. But it works." Hours later. Back at the Galactic Council chamber, an emergency session is in progress. Dax, still visibly glitching, addresses the silent room. We have no choice." He exhales slowly, his light dimming. As of this moment, humanity is to be reclassified. A long pause. Then, with an air of finality. As an Omega-class civilization. A collective shudder ripples through the chamber. Admiral Kirul clenches his fists. "We can't stop them, can we?" Dax's glow pulses weakly. "No. We can only hope they never realize what they are." The bridge of the infinite probability is dead silent. Captain Zan stares at Rodriguez like he's looking at a walking paradox. The quantum drive, a machine so advanced that its construction required entire planets of scientists, now purrs like a well-tuned engine. No explosions. No cascading failures. No violation of basic cause and effect. It just works. Zan's mandibles click softly. His voice comes out hoarse, like he's barely holding onto his grip on reality. What did you just do? Rodriguez shrugs. Fixed it? A long, painful silence. Every alien on the bridge is too stunned to move, let alone speak. Then, as if nothing had just happened, Rodriguez takes a casual sip of his coffee, smacks his lips, and adds, "By the way, we should really upgrade the coffee machine." Hours later, a new emergency decree is passed. A decree that will be etched into the annals of galactic history, studied by scholars, feared by military strategists, and whispered by leaders of every civilization. It reads: Galactic Council Directive Number 117. Under no circumstances should a human ever be allowed to say, "Hold my universe." The Council does not elaborate. They do not explain what might happen. Because, deep down, every species in the galaxy already knows. The Council chamber was empty now. The meeting had ended hours ago, yet High Commissioner Dax remained, his crystalline body still glowing with unease. Admiral Kirill stood beside him, arms crossed, staring at the recording of Marcus Rodriguez on the hologram. A human. A mere engineer. With no advanced tools, no theoretical training in quantum mechanics, and certainly no understanding of fourth-dimensional probability collapse. And yet, somehow, he had rewritten the rules of reality itself. Kirill exhaled, a deep, guttural sound. "We cannot let this spread." Dax pulsed dimly. "How do we contain it?" A long pause. Then Kirill, the most decorated war strategist in the galaxy, uttered the only words that made sense. "Pray they never say, 'Hold my universe.'" And with that, the Council officially classified humanity not as a threat, not as a plague, but as something far worse. A cosmic anomaly that should never, under any circumstances, be challenged.